Hello, everyone, and welcome to class 2 on grief mapping. If you'd watched the first video, you've probably done the meditation or at least have a good understanding of the meditation. In that one, we did several things, including listing a lot of the things that you may use to distract or numb yourself when you're dealing with trauma, and also individual things that stress you out. Let's say it's your job that you don't like very much. Let's say it's an estranged parent. Maybe you're fighting with your partner, maybe you've broken up with your partner, and you haven't gotten over it yet. So in this class, what we're going to be doing is focusing on one of those stressors or traumas. And the reason I say stressors or traumas is because stress and trauma is really the same thing. It's just more of a degree, a spectrum, right? So a stressor is something that may just cause you a little bit of anxiety or depression day to day, where a trauma becomes something where you get so overwhelmed that you start to take on maybe some serious neuroses or psychoses or a long-term depression or severe anxiety disorder. And so understand that what we're dealing with when we talk about stress and trauma is really actually broad spectrum, right? Just the same way mental illness and injury are really broad spectrum, right? You may start with a small neuroses and left untreated, or if the stress or the trauma is not dealt with, those slight neuroses can turn into extreme psychoses which can then obviously lead to things like suicide, homicide, self-harm, harm of other people, um, heavy drug use, that kind of thing. So what we're going to be doing in this class is going to be pretty straightforward, is talking about a particular thing, a person, place, event, or thing that causes you stress or has caused you trauma. So this might be a past event or a past person where whatever happened in a block of time in the past and doesn't occur anymore, but the memories, right? Cellular, intellectual, emotional memories are reverberating into your present moment and affecting how you're able to build your life in the future. Or it might be a thing that's happening to you right now, causing you a large amount of stress, or it could have been, a really traumatic event that happened yesterday that's still fresh in your mind. Whatever it is, you're going to put it in here. Let me just make sure you guys can see what I can see. Okay, it's not bad. I'm going to try to see if I can make this a little bigger. Bear with me real quick. Let's try to increase the size on this. There we go. Okay, so you can see here I have person, place, event, or thing. So I guess I'll put in estranged parent. Okay. I'm not going to put any specific details. Now you see here I put the title estranged parent. I'll take it out in parentheses now where they were using an actual example. And you see here it says particular event. What you're going to do here is try to imagine, if it's, for instance, an estranged parent or a parent you've had a lot of issues with, try to imagine some key points that were difficult in the relationship. For instance, parent used to take all my money when I saved up and guilted me into having money because they couldn't manage it. You might have a situation with Munchausen syndrome. I'm not sure how to spell that, so I'm going to spell it not right. Munchausen syndrome, where the parent would constantly think you were sick or ill and then prescribe you with medication or keep you home from school. So that's another one. Physical abuse, right? The real big bad one, sexual abuse. So you start listing all of the particular, right? The real solid bullet points of the things that really bug you. And once you do this, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have, let's say you have the estranged parent, and then you're gonna have these sort of key main points of the things that happen in this relationship. What we're gonna do is we're gonna make a copy of this. Okay, and then we're gonna duplicate it. And so what we're doing is kind of like, you'll see when I get there. It's almost like we're bringing orders of magnitude in, like we're putting a higher magnifying on the microscope as we look into your mind, into the trauma that you're having. So bear with me. I'm just going to get that guy out of here. Insert page break. And we're going to paste it here. So what we're going to do here is where we had the estranged parent as the main title, and we had a list of a couple of things that had happened. What we're going to do down here is take one of those bullet points, and we're going to bring it up to the top here, almost like we've taken a magnifying glass on what's happened to you. And now we're looking deeper into the particular thing. So let's say we talk about someone, a parent that you had that had, the Munchausen syndrome, where they would, either make you believe you were sick so that they could justify some sort of behavior that they did to you, or they could justify like making you out to be not in the right state of mind to be able to make decisions for yourself. So if you got an argument with them, kind of like gaslighting, it's like you get an argument, so you have a real anger issue. We need to bring you into the doctor and find out why you're so angry. But you may just be arguing good points with the parent, but the parent, because they're so locked up in their ego and being the right way and having their own traumatic experiences, they see you as a threat. So, sometimes I think this is intentional and it's awfully sinister, but I could imagine in situations where the person is in no control whatsoever of their subconscious and very little control of the conscious, they might just project their illness upon you and make you the bad guy. And so there's a sinister gaslighting, but then there seems to be this not so sinister one, which is really happening in an automatic way as a threat fear response from the parent. So you might say, when I was young, every time I coughed, my parent freaked out and brought me to the doctor, right? Or it might be, every time I argued, even when I had a good point, I was told I had some kind of mental illness, right? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to narrow down to a particular event where this happened. So however many times you have to do this, let's say you make 3 sets of boxes. You do the actual thing, the actual like solid event or person in your life that was causing all that stress and trauma. Then the sort of main tactics or main boundary breaking they did, or just like main ideas of the attacks they would put on you. And then you break down sort of the tactics within that. So if it's the Munchausen syndrome, they always thought I was sick when I was a kid, and I always felt like I was sick, and it would actually make me sick or something. Or like, bring me to the psychiatrist because, I would stand up for myself, if they were doing something over and over again to me, like being abusive, and they'd be like, hey, leave me alone. And then, that would occur over a certain amount of times. And the parent would slowly be like, well, I think you have an anger issue, or you have bipolar. We need to bring you into the doctor. Now what you want to do is sort of now you want to do a defining event, like that happened within a certain space of time, like an actual specific event that happened to you, and you want to elaborate on that. So we're going to copy and paste one more time. I did that wrong. So here you're just putting that main point, and we're actually not going to use the bullets. This is what we're going to do. Or we're not going to use the table. We're going to be using bullet points, okay? So this is where it changes a little bit. You put the bullet point for, every time I argued when I had a good point, I was told I had some kind of mental illness. And then you might bullet point out again and step it in one, okay? And what you're doing here is saying, I was eventually put on medication. Medication made me feel terrible. I would fight about being on it. So you start just kind of listing out the actual story of what happened. And then we start to talk about the emotions that you felt, right? Extreme frustration, sadness. You might have actually gotten actual emotions taking the actual pill because it changes the way your brain works. You might have felt more depression. You might have felt powerless, right? Hopeless, confused, angry, you name it, right? But then what I want you to do once you start listing out a lot of those things is I want you to go back and write an actual journal entry of whatever this event from front to back, how it made you feel, et cetera, et cetera. Do an actual journal entry. So I'm not going to do that because I really can't come up with a whole story for you here. I'm kind of like, spitballing. But once you start to write that journal entry, what you're starting to do is actually document the inside of your mind regarding all these things that stressed you out. This isn't meant to dwell on your traumas, okay? This is meant to figure out what's sitting around and bouncing around your head that you need to clean out, that you haven't dealt with. Because what's going to happen when you start to write this story is you're going to actually start to pull up the actual emotions and you're going to find out, wow, I haven't actually dealt with this. You might even feel kind of angry at the person who did it or whatever the case may be, because it might just be an event. It might be like a house fire where your house burnt down and you lost everything, right? Just writing about maybe that you just need to cry about. Right. So it's less complex when it's like an event, like a natural disaster, unless, of course, you sort of pin an anger to like God. Like, how could God do this? Right. That's a completely different situation where you have to develop a higher understanding of what God is. Because if you have, so this is where it really gets interesting in understanding what stress and trauma is. If you have a preconceived notion that God is good and always looking out for the people that are good, and then your house burns down and you're like, why the heck would this happen to me? I'm a good person or whatever. So there's one of two scenarios right off the bat. There's millions that it could be, but one of two scenarios are happening here in your worldview, right? Either you're wrong about your God or you're wrong about you being good, right? So either there is a God that looks out for people that are good and doesn't let their house burn down, right? And you aren't actually as good as you thought you were, or the God you thought you existed isn't quite that God. There's at least some different personality and characteristics of that God that you weren't aware of because your house did burn down, even though you went to church every Sunday and tithed and ate the cracker and drank the wine and all that. So what's happening in those situations? You have to contend with your own philosophy and contend with your own spirit. This isn't a contending with God. So people who put their ire to, it's kind of like when atheists come out of, these atheists that used to be Christians and they come out of the church and they're traumatized by the church and they have this ire toward God. Well, they don't have ire toward God. They have ire towards those people who were interpreting God in such a way that it traumatized them. Right. And so make sure that when you're dealing with your trauma, that you don't have any misplaced anger, misplaced blame for the situation. Okay. So, but when we're dealing with people, it becomes a lot more complex, actually, than something like an event, like getting hit by a car, something like that, or getting in a car accident. Those a lot of times are accidents. It's not the person purposely trying to hit you with a car, right? So when you're dealing with a person who has willingly or willfully done something to you to traumatize you, that person is usually also not going to be open to listening and compromising and working through the problem. They were willing to do this terrible thing to you in the first place they're probably not the kind of person that's going to sit down and say, okay, let's talk about this. I'm sorry. Let me hear you out. Right. And so human beings have this need or desire to seek closure and compromise and resolution with the people who are their abusers, right? There's a real cathartic release when you're able to do that. And I'm not saying it doesn't ever happen, but when it does, it feels like $1,000,000. So what you're probably going to have to do is simulate the closure, right? And so there's a couple ways we can do this. One is what's called the open chair method, where you put a chair across from you and you pretend that person's in the chair, right? And then you have a discussion, and you really say your piece and explain, like, what it did to you, that it was wrong and they shouldn't have done that. You might also be able to do if someone sitting in the chair, playing that person for you, and someone that you trust and respect and has got a good head on their shoulders, and they can sort of validate you. Like they can kind of play the part, but play the part in the appropriate way that they should have played, the real person should have played in your life. And so you'll say, hey, it was wrong that you put me on medication and this, that, and the third. And they're like, you know what? That was me. Yeah, that was me taking advantage of you, and you were a kid and I was an adult, and you couldn't even stop me from bringing you there, and you were in control of my rights, or I was in control of your rights. Like, there was nothing you could do to stop me. I can understand how you'd feel hopeless, and that was really wrong, and I'm very, very sorry. They can actually play the part, which can be really, really helpful, because what you're looking for is the emotional release. Okay, so this next part is really, really important. I'm gonna say all of it really, really slow and explain it in detail. But this is the part you really, really gotta get. In the first episode, I had explained a little bit of this idea of the reason we become traumatized or stressed out is because we confront something in reality that we did not expect and we were not prepared to cope with. Okay, so we didn't see it coming, because if we saw it coming, we would have dodged it, right? We would have never had the stress or trauma. You know what I mean? Like, if you knew that, something, there was having property on in the panhandle, like in Florida, would ultimately lead to, like on the beach, would ultimately lead to your house being destroyed by a hurricane. Like, if you knew when the hurricane was coming, you probably wouldn't have bought that house, or you would have sold it ahead of time, right, and got a new property. But we can't see these things coming, right? Because we can't always see the future. I'm not gonna say we can't see the future, because I've got my assumptions, but you can't just like see the future on a day-to-day basis. So you're not gonna see the trauma coming. Same thing when you make a new friend, right? If you made a new friend, but they just happen to be like completely out of their minds and a really huge abuser that even enjoys abusing people and hurting people, well, you might not be able to see that coming off the bat, right? But you eventually come to realize after the thing has been done to you that this person was no good. But had you had more wisdom about like understanding interactions with people and seeing red flags, you would have been able to avoid that. So if that's the case, right? So what's happening is that there's these infinite potentialities that are in the future, and you're in the present moment, and you're always entering into that future, and it's becoming the present moment. We don't know anything that's going to happen. Like, a meteor could crash right now, right, and like blow me out the window, and then I lose an arm or something crazy like that. There's no way for me to know that's going to happen until it happens. And so this is true with any type of thing that can traumatize you. On top of that, like, some things overwhelm you because you just can't comprehend them. Imagine it being something like a war breaks out, right? And you just start to see like incredibly terrible tragedies in a war, and you weren't prepared because your country was never some place that you expected that could be a war, nor did you understand that human beings could commit such evil. So that's another thing. Like, if your worldview cannot comprehend a particular type of wickedness or evil, that'd be another way you might get traumatized. And so when we have these sort of things happen, what we have to do is sort of the reverse in order to heal the situation. And so when you're dealing directly with your trauma and you start to feel that emotion, this is a very biochemical aspect of it. So this is where you have to call it up. And now there's different tactics and techniques. Like I said, the open chair, right? The screaming into the pillow and punching the pillow, journaling, listening to music, experiencing any kind of art that is similar to what you went through. You might even find an artist who went through the particular thing you did, whether it's a writer, a filmmaker, a musician, and you find a piece of their art which expresses this in a really powerful way that is able to evoke the emotion in you. These are different types of therapy you can use to evoke the emotion. What you need to do is really sit with it, right, and separate yourself from any distraction or the numbers and addictors that we went over in the first class. You know your list of things that your mind will try to do when you're focusing on the trauma. So you'll have your list of things. Oh, I can't do that. That's something I would do that would give my mind the dopamine hit, and then I'll be able to run away from the pain. It's when you drop the amount of dopamine you're giving yourself that you get down to the point where it's like, because you're cashed out on serotonin because you haven't been producing it because you've been addicted to the dopamine response, and you've been doing that synthetically, right? So when you cut out the dopamine and you're sitting there with the trauma and you're doing one of these therapy things that are meant to evoke the emotion's going to come out. And as long as you continually surrender to the truth under the emotion, like let's say a partner or spouse cheated on you, but we were with this person for 10 years and you trusted them with your life. So when you're surrendering to the emotion, you also have to surrender to the fundamental fact that people can do that to you, that they're not the only one, right? And you could literally trust someone for 10 years and be faithful yourself, and still they could do that to you. The biggest problem we have is that we don't accept the fundamental truth of what's happened, right? It's one thing to deal with it, says, you know what, screw them. They were just crazy, da 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 da. Like, you can write off anything that happens to you. But if you can't accept the fundamental truth that in this reality, that potential for trauma can rest in any moment in any person, then you can get re-traumatized the same way. So when you surrender, you have to surrender to your personal experience and then accept the natural truth that sort of situation exists in the world, and it can exist again in any moment or any person in the future. When you truly give way to that's when you fundamentally transcend your philosophy of life, or you fundamentally transcend your understanding of or in relationship with God or creator or whatever you think's happening here, right? That's that second level, surrendering, and then we accept. Okay. But then once we do that, we have to start to talk about evolution, because you have to evolve out of that moment, because you want to be prepared mentally, physically, for the next time it could happen. So let's say you're physically or sexually abused, right? What you want to be able to do is be physically fit to take that person out the next time around. Being nice isn't going to get you anywhere in that situation, right? Like, just trying to like hide and be small and not be seen. Like, some people, after they go through a sexual abuse, they'll gain massive amounts of weight because they want to make themselves unattractive. That's not a long-term strategy. Learning how to choke somebody out is, though. Learning how to knock somebody out, like with a 1-2 combo, is scaring the hell out of the person that's trying to hurt you. That's a real, you know what I mean? And so we have to come up with viable long-term solutions. Now that's the evolution, right? So it's acceptance, surrender, evolution. We'll talk about acceptance and evolution later on, because right now we're just at the surrender point. But I just wanted to give you kind of an idea. It's like this whole process leads to a better outcome, a better situation than before you even got traumatized. You're trying to go from this really bad place to actually not just a normal neutral level, even higher than that. Because after surrender, acceptance, and evolution, it's creation. And creation is how you bring about something in the world to try to solve the issue for other people. And this is the highest level you can reach when you come out of your trauma, is actually be able to be a person who rights those wrongs for other people and heals those traumas in other people. It's kind of like the guy that wrote the book Child Called It. He took it to that fourth level of creation and expression and like philanthropy for other people, to try to heal other people's hearts and rise them out of the same trauma that he went through. So that's the whole cycle of trauma. And when we grow from it in that way, we actually make a profound positive impact in the world. Where it started with us being hurt, we actually turn that into something good and reverse the curse. So Make sure you try this second exercise out, and feel free to comment in the Discord and let me know what you thought. All right, you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.